Medieval 2 Total War. Undoubtedly the greatest Total War game ever made, at least for me. I've only started playing Total War since last year, but I have quickly grown fond of its fusion between turn-based and real-time strategy and the addictive time-consuming nature. Now, I've watched 3K's Philip for quite some time, and he made a few Total War videos where he wrecked the armies of France while playing England.
For this, I have chosen to play as the English and to crush the French, rating how fun it is to do in each and every game.
And I've gotta be honest, he did a great job. But there's one thing that has been buggering me all this time. In his Medieval 2 Total Crash video, he never did any justice for poor King Rufus. Or any justice that we knew of, that is. So today, I'll be playing King Rufus on his redemption arc. Let's begin. If you haven't watched Philip's video, he did conquer France, but Prince, soon to be King, Rufus's only recognized contribution was soiling his pants attempting to attack a rebel province. It was due to a family member named Robert who single-handedly ended the nation of France by accidentally killing the entire French royal family. Rufus's efforts were struck null and void because Philip's game crashed after every single battle. I started by seizing control of several rebel provinces, sending my untrained spearmen into the fight against angry pitchfork-wielding peasants. They would attack a few rebel provinces in the first few turns to consolidate my income. Leading the fight into York, you bet, was Prince Rufus. William the Conqueror, his father, was hit comfortably in London while his son attempted to win his purse. I also did what Philip had done in his attempt. I allied with France in the first turn and gained some map information. The attack on York didn't go so smoothly as the enemy that was expected to surrender, didn't surrender. The rallied fought and attacked Rufus' troops. The spearmen held their ground, and by utilizing the peasant archers, Rufus began to push them back, personally intervening by charging his cavalry group into the enemy. My casualties near 100, but half of their forces were wiped out. I didn't care to pursue them any longer, so I took my victory and planned for future endeavors. Sorry. Meanwhile, Robin, the general attacking Rhône, a province in northwest France, was also attacked by the enemy he had been sieging. He had the luxury of having twice his enemy's forces and absolutely wrecked the rebels. In a deja vu event, the enemy charged at my forces and was promptly captured, only to be executed later on because, well, I cannot ransom rebels.
The enemy dies in George! We've captured the enemy's general! That'll teach the cowardly dog to turn tail and run! Now he can rest at our leisure.
After that, I finished by taking Wales. The bowman's performance was marred by the fog. It was a very, very close battle. They started attacking before I could consolidate a proper defensive position. I had limited infantry and one unit was already worn down after a battle. Rufus ordered the knights to attack, and sure enough, even the best longbowmen of Wales started fleeing. In no time, I defeated the Wales rebel and took his assets, and then put Rufus on a boat and shipped him with a small army to Europe, joining Robin in the fight for the last rebel province in northern France. Meanwhile, his father William will conquer Scotland. The Scots had already landed a pretty large fort near York, led by the Canmore brothers. I was worried, but they just seemed happy hanging outside the city. They weren't a threat, for now. It was around this time that I started tinkering with the French. I started doing what Philip tried to do with Scotland, provoking them by sending unacceptable offers. And them having their priorities being war, they immediately broke the alliance and marched an army towards Caen. This prompted immediate action from Prince Rufus. He quickly took Bruges in the brutal fight for the town. He could have done a much better job considering how he had more than twice the enemy force, but it is alright, he will now head to Paris. Caen was largely under-defended by a few units and honestly, they were taken surprise by the siege. But with the power of auto-resolve on my side, I won against the attackers and proceeded to execute every prisoner. Prince Rufus reached Paris and set up a siege. He knew that inside the city was a man named Philip, not that Philip, the man responsible for the destruction brought upon his country. And now, he will exact revenge. Then the Pope came and told me to stop, so I stopped. Rufus headed towards Cologne and let his army recover. Meanwhile, my diplomat tried to keep a good relationship with the Germans who have now become France's ally. And to make matters a whole lot worse, William the Conqueror died, leaving the men in England to fight alone against the Scottish. Well, now, King Rufus marched to France and mounted an attack on the camp in Canmores, but it resulted in the total destruction of the only fighting army in northern England. It was partly due to inexperienced infantry leading the fight, but it was also because I made several critical mistakes. And the fact that I didn't even have a general. Whatever the reason might have been, my army in the British Isles was decimated, and it would take a few clicks to rebuild.
Lord preserve us. We've been dealt a stinging defeat today.
In France, Rufus was met by two big French armies. He gently refused to engage. Well, after making really sure that they weren't there anymore, he came to Paris again until one of the armies he had met before attacked him to rescue the French king. He faced them, knowing that the French king was a better commander and filled up a larger force than his.
I shall lead our forces into battle, my lord.
In the fight, Rufus ordered his longbowmen to plant sharpened stakes in front of them lest the French cavalry charged. The French human wave ran towards my spearmen. 3 English cavalry units flanked in retaliation. Now I established a doctrine of supreme firepower over the copious use of elite longbowmen. The enemy would turn tail and run after the third or so wave of arrows. Still, the melee was hairy at times. Like when my melee formation broke and some of the enemy units moved in dangerously close to the longbowmen. But the thousands of arrows coming to them proved too much of a help hazard and they backed down to losing too many men. The French cavalry flanked my formation and started attacking King Rufus' cavalry unit. But he held firm, playing with them while ordering the longbowmen to rain death upon the enemy. Soon, even the mightiest of French cavalry routed. I stood firm against the first army, but then the smaller but fearsome force arrived, led by the King of France himself. The French king rushed to meet my forces and I replied with a big wave of spearmen supported by archer. Another band of spearmen attacked mine. The loose formation meant that my longbowmen had a hard time hitting the targets, but with the help of my knights, the French started running away. Some of my forces unfortunately routed, but I didn't care. The coward dogs can die alone for all I give a damn. It only took a while for the French to start fleeing en masse. I hunted him down, and soon enough, victory was mine.
Enemy king lies dead, slain by our gallant warriors. Behold how our cowardly foe runs. It's time to press the attack.
Still, I had a critical situation in northern England. I quickly deployed some units and sent Robert to regain the strategic advantage. The generally inexperienced Robert would have to face against Alexander Canmore, an actual 10-star general. I had 4 units of infantry, but I had good longbowmen at my disposal. They rained fiery death upon the Scottish infantry. My horsemen group charged at the flank to devastating effect, but they weren't prepared for prolonged combat and were taken surprise by the general charging at them. I had to hold him back and let the longbowmen shoot the attackers down. You can see how hard they were hit. Nevertheless, they completed their duties quite well, and because I'm awful with keeping the defensive line intact, some of the enemy melee troops reached my archer lines and started doing quite some damage. But after being worn down by wave after waves of arrows, the Canmore brothers fell one by one.
Good tidings. The enemy general lies dead. We've sent the base cur to hell.
I eventually won, but this came at a big cost. My army in England had been reduced to a handful of men. I can't advance with so little melee infantry. But Robert did so anyway. He would have to face Prince David of Scotland, a young man yearning to earn his respect. But he went into the woods for some reason, leaving Edinburgh and the king exposed. Robert quickly seized the city, and after one flawless auto-resolve, Scotland was no more. This resolved my financial crisis with many needed florins. Meanwhile, King Rufus laid siege on Paris with a large force. This angered the Pope, but I couldn't care less. Excommunication is the least of my concerns. While waiting for them to surrender, I built a large army and attacked Angus. Okay. I had twice the size of the enemy army, and I made sure that none of the troops garrisoned in the fortress, which also happened to be one single unit of a general whose name I can't be born to pronounce, couldn't attack me.
Yes, my lord. Preparing the men to attack.
And now all is said. Let's to it, pell-mell, and send our enemies to fry in hell!
After a pretty good speech from the unknown army leader, my forces engaged the enemy, staying true to the doctrine of supreme firepower to artillery fire. My attempt to flank the enemy was nothing short of a failure, but to manpower superiority, I pushed them back. It was around this time that the enemy garrison inside the fortress came, which is basically 46 armored men with really long sticks riding horseback.
Pursue it!
The siege of Paris was interrupted by an enemy attack, which is exactly what I've been waiting for. The French have evacuated the king to someplace else, leaving his son, Prince Michel, to face Rufus and his great army. I made it sound like a great battle, but no, it was just me having complete superiority.
Well, here's the thing. I look at our foes and I see nothing but arse weasels. A bunch of piss-a-bed, cod-nibbling, rotund, hoof merchants and sheep-worrying gits. I've seen donkeys' arseholes with more guts than those tosspots. So, it's time to teach the buggers a lesson in fighting like men, not Nancy Winkle pickers. Are you ready? Our foes, the French, it is said, are better lovers than they are fighters. This is true, lads. Ask any goat, pig, or other farmyard animal. We band of brothers are 1/4 of England's soldiers, and thus we carry a heavy duty to our people, our king, and our God. And this time, lads, try to listen to the orders. I don't just shout this stuff out because I like the sound of my own voice. There is a point to all the shouting, and a battle to be won!
After experimenting with pyrotechnics as a weapon against the enemy, King Rufus prepared for the enemy attack. He utilized his longbowmen to devastating effect. Again, Rufus' spearmen completely overwhelmed his enemy, and their routing was a sight to be seen. Even the enemy general personally engaging in melee couldn't help. Victory was well within my grasp.
The enemy are badly bloodied. They have lost half their men.
A big chunk of the French army was decimated, while I suffered minimal casualties. My power race was now absolutely empty. There were still 2 more armies around the city, and of course artillery smoked them, whatever. Power race was now mine. Rufus wanted to exterminate the populace, but his advisors offered the opportunity of filling England's coffers with much needed finance to wage war for years to come. So he did that. James Hill, the man behind the great victory in Angers, was adopted into the English royal family. He was now a nobleman. I gave him a big army and he marched towards the fortress of Toulouse, whatever. Meanwhile, Robert fielded a smaller army and laid siege to Rhône. But the French came with a big, intimidating army, so he had to back down. He headed back to Caen to build a bigger army. The French prince faced James' Hill army when he knew he was cordoned up in Toulouse and help wasn't coming. He had pretty good troops at his disposal, but I also resolved it because James Hill was a lot better than the prince himself and he could lead the fight alone. And James Hill killed the enemy prince in an also resolved battle. Interestingly, at the same time that the French prince died in the attack on Toulouse, I found the elusive French king all alone near Paris, with only his bodyguards. I could have sent an army in to finish him up and destroy the French Empire altogether in that turn. separating, because that'd be no fun. So I left him to his own devices, hoping that he wouldn't get killed randomly by some level 0 Inquisitor. I discovered that the French had another big army in southern France, but my hands were tied. I was already expending too many men taking Rhône. King Rufus firstly ordered Robert to scout the southern parts of France as he was seized as Harold Rhône himself. Now things started to look up. Portugal offered an alliance with me, to which I accepted. The French king started the long walk to Marseilles, the only city that isn't in danger for now. With the taking of Toulouse, I have destroyed France's ability to rebuild their army, or at least one that would be up to par. Rufus finally breached the walls and took Rhône, destroying the largest army the French had in northern France. Wasn't that easy? As King Rufus joined Robert on the march to Marseilles, Spain allied with France. The Spanish owned this one fort here, which makes the limited presence of troops in the regions like Angers and Rhône untenable. So I decided to strike first, sending Robert on his way. This is the third time he's told to do something else. But of course, I had to do it after they gave me trait rights and map information. And because Karma is a loose woman, the Germans attacked me in a bid to protect France. After all the flaunts I gave them, I quickly mobilized my force and reinforced the border cities. They tried to take Rhône, but auto-resolve slaughtered them. It works every time. On the way to Marseilles, Rufus met his nemesis, a French army led by King Louis of France. Unfortunately, they weren't prepared. Rufus was.
Not badly. Our foes, the French, it is said, are better lovers than they are fighters. This is true, lads. Ask any goat, pig, or other farmyard animal.
After an inspiring speech, Rufus brought death upon his enemies. Again, the fact that I excel in jungle combat by nature of being a Vietnamese didn't help the French either. They will soon turn tail and run.
The enemy king is slain. A worthy enemy, but no less dead for that. We must press our advantage.
Upon knowing that the king has died, they hastily crowned French Uyard and sent him with a sizable army to retake Toulouse. My army in the fortress was outnumbered. They had 1,000 more men. But auto-resolve crushed them anyways, with them, leaving them with some 900 men left and the prince barely alive. And because I'm such a pacifist, I released the prisoners. And then I massacred the invading Germans. New plans were drawn up. After Robert had taken Bordeaux, what blocked this precipitous bridge here, denying both the Germans and the Milanese from marching into France. Anyways, Robert attacked the force and killed the Spanish prince, thus to send the others a message. The French prince returned to lay siege to Toulouse again, but immediately retreated when he caught sight King Rufus' army. But I made a big mistake. Rufus' army was caught between a bridge and unable to move, having spent all his movement points. But not all was lost. The French prince had become King Urdarda. The new French Prince Louis didn't make it past the bridge in time and now had been blocked by my army. But Rufus risked being attacked by both sides. On the other side, the French garrisoned most of their forces inside the city, but they can quickly deploy to a nearby army almost any time. Rufus decided to stand firm on the bridge. The French saw the opportunity and the enemy king attacked me with his friends reinforcing. Had taken a gamble just to rout a small number of enemy troops. As a result, all my spearmen routed and had to rely on my longbowmen and my only cavalry unit. I managed to rout the French king's army and killing him in the process.
The enemy king is slain. A worthy enemy, but no less dead for that. We must press our advantage.
But the French prince arrived. Rufus ordered them to shoot him down at all costs and forcibly intervened, fighting on horseback and killing many. Soon I was victorious. But this came as a huge cost. Rufus' army had been virtually destroyed. With Rufus having only a handful of spearmen left, the French rallied all their forces, some 2,000 men, and attacked me. And even with the best of longbowmen, the lack of melee support proved too much for Rufus' army to handle. Some of them fought to the death, King Rufus had to evacuate. He took the bitter loss heartily.
This defeat is a bitter drop to swallow. Next time it'll be our foe that sups from this most foul cup.
Going back to Toulouse, Rufus handpicked the best infantry to fight with him in the last battle against France. It took a few turns for him to fully rebuild his army to an even better one at that. He now had a few dismounted feudal knights, hard-hitting heavy infantry with an imposing profile. Rufus crossed the bridge with no opposition and reached Marseilles. The garrison now has a mind-boggling 2,600 men protecting the last bastion of France. After laying down the siege, some French guys thought it'd be a good idea to attack first, with 60 men against my 2,300. Sure, they had the biggest backup force, a force even bigger than mine, but that was still suicide. I ordered my cavalry to charge first and destroyed the meek opposition, then turned to the French army, led by Prince Antoine. As expected, Rufus' troop destroyed the opposition, raining hails of arrows from the sky and destroying the formation and morale of the French army. Rufus ordered the cavalry to flank the enemy, but they didn't do quite a good job and he lost a lot of men. The battle left huge packs of dead body behind. Nevertheless, this resulted in the French army basically destroyed, and with them having only a handful of men left, I can now attack myself and destroy France for good.
Death has come, lads, but not for you. The enemy must feel his hand on their shoulders even now.
Rufus encountered little resistance and the gates fell easily. The English soldiers rushed to the central courtyard and swarmed the enemy. Frame rates were awful. The French lost their king relatively early into the battle. They tried to intervene by flanking my long line of troops in the back, but my longbowmen destroyed them. This was when the cavalry rushed in and finished what's left of France for good. It was over. Rufus had led the English people into victory over France. King Rufus the Merciless can now rightfully go down as one of the greatest kings in history. Even if he was a little bit too loud-mouthed, drunk, and secretly an evil dictator, he did incredible things, and I can now lay this game to rest. Thank you for watching. This has been your narrator, Alex.